And now a message from the mayor of Raccoon City.
Hello, citizens of Raccoon City. I just wanted to come before you today to address growing concerns that many of you might be having over the rumors that there could be a potential zombie infestation within our beloved town. I just wanted to say that these rumors are ludicrous. They are preposterous. There is no zombie infestation in Raccoon City. What we are seeing is most likely a cold or flu or virus, and I'm sure that by the time that summer rolls around, it will all just disappear. Until then, if you find yourself not feeling well, if you've suddenly developed a taste for human brains, if your face has begun to look like a giant spider with a big glowing eyeball in the middle of it, then please, I advise you to stay at home and practice safe social distancing for as long as you still have control over your motor functions. Also, my advisors want me to inform everyone that if a tentacle has begun to grow out of the top of your head, please do not try and hide it through the use of a comedically large hat, as I have been told numerous times that is fooling no one. But for everyone else out there who still feels okay, who has not been infected yet, I would still advise everyone to try and remain at least 6 feet away from everyone else so as to make it harder for them to reach out and grab and bite you. Also, whatever you do, do not touch your face. That is the quickest way to spread a virus. Also, scientists have informed me that if you get your hand that close to your nose, the smell of your own skin could send you into what they describe as a mad, hungry craze for human flesh. And nobody wants that. Again, I know what all this sounds like, but I assure you there are no zombies in Raccoon City. A mummy? Maybe. Vampires? Sure, it could happen. Max, it's a werewolf. If you want to have a conversation about werewolves, I'm all for it. But zombies created by our good friends at Umbrella in a secret lab underneath our feet at this very moment, that is just ridiculous. And okay, I can see from the ominous looking man wearing sunglasses in the back giving me the shut up sign that it is time to end this press conference. So let me just say thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, make sure to wash your hands, and remember, no matter what, do not try and fight the virus by drinking any household cleaners or bleach, as our scientists have informed me that just seems to make the mutations stronger and angrier.
This has been a message from the mayor of Raccoon City, a proud subsidiary of Umbrella Corps.
I know some of you might have thought that opening was in poor taste, but in my defense, this is literally how this video game begins.
This pandemic has spread faster than any disease in modern history.
Angry mobs roam the city. Buildings.
A citywide emergency has been declared.
The CDC has quarantined the lower Midwestern region of the...
Is it possible for something to age poorly before it even comes out? Here's our review of the Resident Evil remake.
Last year, Capcom finally gave us the remake of Resident Evil 2 that fans have been asking for and rumors have been circulating about for nearly a decade, and it blew us away. It was our #1 game of last year, sold insanely well, won all kinds of praise and accolades. It was kind of a big deal. So of course it was only a matter of time until they remade Resident Evil 3 as well, and the fateful day is finally here. Did it live up to the high expectations left by its predecessor? Yes! Well, no. Sometimes. Not always. It's kind of a mixed bag. Let's start with the story. Jill Valentine, living with a strong dose of paranoia and PTSD after her experience in the Spencer Mansion, now has to escape the zombie-overrun Raccoon City. She ends up meeting a gang of Umbrella mercenaries who are trying to get people out of the city, and as you can imagine, Jill isn't exactly happy to be working alongside the people who shoved her inside of a death house. But she agrees to work alongside one of these agents, Carlos, because he seems ignorant to Umbrella's evil side, like he actually is trying to help people. And also because, well, just look at him. Can you blame her? A computer-generated man should not be that pretty. But throughout the game, these two uncover what's happening in Raccoon City and slowly bond, and I have to be honest with you, there are 2 MVPs of this game, and the relationship between Jill and Carlos is one of them. Watching Jill go from standoffish to trusting, and Carlos go from joking to respectful, it was great. Both of these characters are wonderful on their own, with Jill being a classic 80s action-style badass, and Carlos, Listen, I'll be honest with you guys. I never cared about Carlos in the other games. I never cared about him in the grand scheme of things or within the Resident Evil lore. But now, I really want to see this version of Carlos return. How can you not love a guy who says something like this?
Now here's a weird fucking door.
You shouldn't be allowed in a Resident Evil game to just stop and point out how weird a Resident Evil game is, but Carlos is loaded with so much charm, he somehow gets away with it. But as good as these characters are separately, whenever you see them together, they have this amazing chemistry that elevates both of them together. Whenever Carlos calls Jill Super Cop, I just smiled from ear to ear. And I'm glad that these two were so good because everyone else in here is as cardboardy as they get. Nikolai is the most one-dimensional villain in a franchise full of one-dimensional villains. Mikhail just sits on a train the entire time. And Tyrell is... I'm sorry, is that just Hannibal Buress? Like, it's not just me, we all see that, right? But even if all the supporting characters are pretty flat, your two main characters are great, and that's the most important thing because they're the ones that you're going to be sticking with throughout this entire adventure. Which brings me to the actual gameplay of Resident Evil 3. Now for a Resident Evil game, you need the right balance between action and scares, between tension and combat. And the Resident Evil 2 remake gave me everything that I was looking for in this franchise. It gave me exactly what I imagine when I think of good Resident Evil gameplay. However, the Resident Evil 3 remake is not being made by the same team. They exported this out to a different party and, well, all the elements of the Resident Evil 2 remake are here, but have you ever gone to a restaurant and there was an expert chef there who crafted this special dish and it was exquisite? Then you go there another day and there's a totally different chef there and they might have all the same ingredients, they have all the same utensils, they even have the instructions right there in front of them. So they create something that is like that dish that you had, but it's missing that special touch. It doesn't have that expert level of craftsmanship behind it. Yeah, that's basically what this is. From the outside, you look at this and you think, yeah, that looks exactly the same. It should be just as good, right? But then when you actually get your hands on it, you realize, oh, there's some problems. Let's talk about the zombies. In the last game, zombies had just the perfect level of dexterity and stamina. They come at you at a sluggish pace, but with a resilience that you could only find in the undead. You would never know where they might pop up next, or how much of your limited ammo it would take to bring them down. But Resident Evil 3 was always more of an action game than Resident Evil 2, so how did they adapt that idea into this remake? By just putting those same RE2 zombies everywhere and making your weapons practically useless. A bold choice, to say the least. Yeah, the regular zombies in this game go from terrifying to frustrating because they seem to just appear out of thin air at times. And I don't know if that has to do with the sound design not making their presence known, or if they're just popping into the map out of thin air, but by the 5th or 6th time that you get grabbed, you're no longer scared. You're just pissed off and you want them to die. But hopefully you've got one of your more powerful guns unlocked because your regular pistol is practically a straw load with a wadded up spitball. Every other weapon in the game still works great, but your regular starter pistol won't even phase these things. And don't even get me started on the knife. Remember in the Resident Evil 2 remake, if you got a zombie on the ground, you could just run up to it and finish it off with a few stabs from your knife? This is a pretty common strategy in Resident Evil games, with the last couple generations all kind of having the same basic idea behind it. But in Resident Evil 3, if you somehow manage to get a zombie on the ground, don't go within arm's reach of it because knocking zombies on the ground essentially just turns them into groaning flesh-hungry landmines. It drove me insane how I would try to save ammo by running up to a downed zombie so I could stab them to death, only for the knife to do nothing as they would reach up and start chomping away. I'd then switch over to my gun to try and finish them off, only for them to immediately jump right back up on me. Or remember how you could try to be smart with your ammo in 2 by aiming at the zombie's legs or arms so that way you could blow them off, so even if you didn't kill the zombie, they would no longer be able to run after you or grab you? That was great and add a brilliant level of strategy to how you play this game. But in here, you can do the same thing, you can still take out their limbs, but why would you even bother? I could unload an entire clip into a zombie's leg, and it would do nothing. You might as well just aim for the head or the chest, because aiming for anything else just feels like you're wasting ammo. Honestly, the zombies in here just lack the subtlety or the details. They don't feel like they were carefully designed for the experience. More like they just picked them up and slopped them onto your plate. I mean, I don't want to sound too harsh, but I could put together an entire montage of how often I saw these things just walking into walls. In fact, I think I will. But they do introduce a handful of new monsters into the game, or at least reimaginings of old monsters. And while I really kind of hated the basic zombies, the variation monsters are actually pretty cool, especially the Hunter Gammas. Man, talk about an improvement. These things went from wet, soggy Muppets to giant eldritch super beast. Get too close to them and they're gonna fold you up and eat you like some kind of I don't know, what's a food that you can fold between two slices of something? Dang it, I can't remember. It'll come to me later. Now, as I said, the original Resident Evil 3 was more action heavy, and part of what cemented that was a new dodge mechanic. And they updated that for this remake, where Jill will now do the old Star Shuffle and she'll bob and weave away from zombies, but if you do the dodge move at just the right time, then it will transform from a regular dodge into a Dark Souls style dodge roll, causing time to slow down, which allows you to get some free shots into the enemy. Now, I think this is a great idea for how to adapt this mechanic, and I've seen a lot of critics who think that this works amazing, and they love it. I kind of think the dodge roll stinks. Listen, I've tried to sugarcoat this a dozen times, and I have to just rip this band-aid off. I think the dodge mechanic is clunky, and when it works and when it doesn't work, seems totally random. And hey, I'll admit, it could just be me. I have no shame in saying I'm not good at a game or admitting that I can't do something. This is not pro gaming tips and tricks with Thorgi. No, this is just me making a bunch of lame jokes while talking about game and hoping that somehow it all comes together and turns out entertaining. But there are moments where I know it's not me. There are certain attacks some enemies have that if you happen to be even remotely close to a wall, you're just going to die. So between that, the random success rate of the dodge roll, and the zombies stun locking you at times when they try and get up off the ground, a lot of times the game in here just feels rushed, like they didn't have enough time to test it as fully as they should have before they had to rush it out the door. But combat isn't exactly the star of Resident Evil. No, that's the atmosphere, the exploration. A good Resident Evil game needs creepy locations, well-designed puzzles, maps that just suck you in so that even if you find yourself going back and forth over them a dozen times, it feels new and engaging each time. And this game is okay. It's fine. It's not terrible. It's not bad. Not great though. One of the few complaints about the Resident Evil 2 remake that I had was that I wish that we got more time to explore Raccoon City itself, and RE3 is all about having to escape from the city. Granted, you do move into a sewer and secret lab level because it's Resident Evil and sewers and secret labs are basically in their contract, but I knew I was going to get to finally see what an overrun Raccoon City really looked like, and it was great! For about 5 minutes. Then I realized that was all I was getting. Yeah, Raccoon City basically boils down to the same 2 city blocks that you're going to run back and forth between over and over again, and one back alley. And while this part of the game was good, and yes, Moon Donuts should totally be a thing, man did I want more of it. The police station in Resident Evil 2 and the Spencer Mansion in Resident Evil 1 felt like brilliantly fleshed out locations that gave you the sense that there were secrets around every door. Here I thought, oh, hey, this block looks cool, and then it was time to move on to the next section of the game. Again, what we got is good. I have to stress that. I know I'm complaining a lot, but it is good. However, I needed about 3 times as much as what we got to really scratch that itch. And I will say, the other locations that you go to are actually handled pretty well. The sewers aren't very long, but they're a creepy enough side route. The hospital is actually wonderfully horrifying as you find the remains of a building that was hit the hardest by the zombie outbreak, and reading notes from the nurses about how they were trying everything in their power to save these people is... well, it's actually really depressing considering everything that's going on in the world, but damn if it wasn't atmospheric as hell. And getting to return to the police station from the last game didn't just feel like I was retraining old grounds, they actually spiced it up by setting your adventure there about half an hour before Leon and Claire showed up, so you could actually see how the station ended up the way that you found it. Really, my only complaint is with the city itself. It's the part of the game I was looking forward to the most, and I feel like they dropped the ball. It feels like they could have created something great, but again, it feels like they just had to rush this thing out. And speaking of rushing, let's address a problem that a lot of people have had with this game: the length. Yes, this game is pretty short, and the original Resident Evil trilogy were all much shorter than the later games, each one around 6 or 7 hours, but the later games got them all up to around 9 or 10 hours, and the remakes all add some extra content to bump it up as well. Except for this one. This one still comes in at around 6 hours, and yes, as I said, this is how long the original was, but it's 2020. We have higher expectations for what we spend our $60 on than we did back then, and I will admit, they did try to add some extra content on here to pad this game out by including the multiplayer game Resident Evil Resistance, but, I kinda wish they had just left that off and only charged me $40 for the base game. Remember our last review for Doom Eternal where I talked about how the multiplayer mode in there was good, but even if it was bad, it wouldn't matter because the base game itself was still a full price game all on its own? This is kind of the exact opposite of that. I mean, I guess I could go into further details about Resistance, but do I have to? Please don't make me talk about Resistance.
So, okay, we covered the characters, we covered the monsters, we covered the combat, we covered the atmosphere. I think that's about everything worth mentioning in this game, so let's go ahead and get into our final scoring. Alright, that.
Yes, time to talk about the big rocket launcher carrying zombie in the room. What made the original Resident Evil 3 so iconic wasn't Raccoon City, it wasn't the increased focus on action, it wasn't even Jill's bizarre choice of fashion. Seriously, who dresses like this when escaping a zombie-infested city? Was she at the club when the apocalypse happened? No, what made this game so iconic was the big baddie Nemesis, an undead Terminator who couldn't be stopped, couldn't be reasoned with. He just kept coming with the mission to kill anyone who was a member of STARS. And I'll admit, going into this remake, I was actually nervous about Nemesis, because in the original, Nemesis was a souped-up version of Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. And in the Resident Evil 2 remake, they nailed Mr. X better than anyone could have dreamed. He blew up as one of the biggest breakout stars of the year, and honestly, as good as everything else in the RE2 remake was, I truly believe Mr. X alone helped bump that game up on many people's Game of the Year list. So the original Nemesis was a better version of the original Mr. X. But now the remake Mr. X was a better version of the original Nemesis, meaning that the remake Nemesis has to be even better than the remake Mr. X. And he wasn't. In fact, I'll be honest with you, get ready for my most controversial opinion in this entire game, because I've seen people torn on the combat. I've seen people torn on the length of the game, torn on pretty much everything, but most people tend to agree that Nemesis is pretty good. I think he kinda stinks. This was honestly a huge letdown for me. I thought we'd have this supercharged monster chasing me throughout each of these locations. I was prepared to be afraid to find this big ghoul hanging around every single corner. Instead, he's just a set piece. He comes out at predetermined times, about 3 times during the start of the game, and just chases you down the same 2 blocks of Raccoon City over and over again. And since these chase sequences aren't all that long, it's pretty easy to outrun him with 1 or 2 well-timed rolls. And then, after that, he's just a cutscene monster. And don't get me wrong, these cutscenes look pretty cool. I would far rather be playing through them. In fact, sometimes they actually would let you play for about 2 seconds during these cutscenes, then go back to cutscene. What the heck is the point of that other than to tease me with how cool it would be to play through this sequence? And in the original game, the smart thing to do would be to run away from Nemesis, but if you stood your ground and actually challenged him and you ended up defeating Nemesis and scaring him off, you would actually get some really amazing upgrades as a reward. And I have to applaud this game because they include that same concept in here. If you do stop and you do actually fight Nemesis and you actually beat him, you will get some special gear. Do you know how hard it is to beat Nemesis in this game? Not at all. Yeah, earlier I talked about how it felt like your regular gun and knife were nerfed in this game, but all your other weapons are still pretty strong, especially the grenades, which one-hit kill pretty much everything, including Nemesis. I remember the first time that I took down Nemesis with just one grenade, my jaw dropped and I literally said, "You have got to be kidding me." Even the big official boss fights against him were just, okay. They've got some cool ideas behind them, but for some reason, whenever you go into these boss fights, the camera gets so close to Jill's face, it's like it's trying to examine her pores. There are times where you are being chased by Nemesis during a boss fight and you need to know exactly where he is so that way you can roll out of the way at just the right time. But Jill is taking up half the screen at that point, so you can't see anything. Or there's another fight later on where not only do you have to keep an eye on Nemesis, but now random zombies start appearing around you, so you have to keep an eye on them so they don't just sneak up on you and start chomping into your neck. And the camera is trying to go up Jill's nose at that point. The X-ray camera that your dentist uses to check your molars gives you more free space than the camera does in these boss fights. But I will say, despite the numerous problems I had with Nemesis, aside from that, I still think that this game is pretty decent. I think it's pretty good. I know it sounds like I've been overly negative, but that's because I've been largely comparing this to the last game. However, you kind of have to. I mean, it is made using the same engine. It is coming out because of the success of the last game. You do revisit many of the same old locations. It's really hard to not compare this to the last game, but looking at it as its own thing, I do think it's okay. It's good. It's just that there isn't that much to say about the good stuff, and the problems really do need to be explored. But when I finished the game, I did like it. I did think it was good. But I had zero urge to go back and play it again. Normally with a Resident Evil game, I can't wait to jump back in. And with this one, I felt like once was enough. That is until I saw what happened after I beat it. As I said, there are two MVPs in this game. One being the chemistry between Carlos and Jill, and the other being the shop. Yes, when you finish this game, they reveal that you were accumulating points with everything you did throughout the game, and you can now spend those points in the store. And I thought, okay, so what, I get to change the color of Jill's shirt, I get a new paint job for my gun? No. Much to my shock, the rewards that you get in this game are actually good. Like, things you would actually want to unlock in a game. Things that actually give you a sense of accomplishment for what you went through. You can get Jill's outfit from the original Resident Evil, a flaming knife that burns up your enemies, extra inventory, medals that boost your stats. You can even unlock unlimited ammo weapons. And speaking as someone who loves achievements, who loves when games give you rewards for your progression, this was exactly what I needed. As I said, I had zero interest in playing through this game again, but after I saw these rewards, I literally went back and replayed it all in one sitting the very next day, trying to rack up as many points and get as many achievements as I could. And you know something? It felt good. I'm still playing it, trying to earn up enough points to get the unlimited rocket launcher. As I said, this game is mostly good, but I kept looking for things in here to be great. And if you're like me, and you love games that reward you for every little thing that you do to encourage replayability, yeah, the shop is great. and it did indeed bump my score up a little. Which feels like a good segue to move into that and wrap this review up. Yes, there's no way around it. Resident Evil 3 doesn't stack up to its predecessors, but it isn't bad. It still looks amazing. Going back and opening up old locations, which was a staple of the early Resident Evil games, still feels fun. And Jill and Carlos are big superstars for this game who I want to see together in future installments. But the zombies lack the details of the last game and honestly feel kind of broken at times in this new action-heavy setting. You don't get to explore nearly as much of the city as you'd like to, and of course, Nemesis himself, well, saying they didn't live up to expectations would be an understatement. However, when looking at the game on its own, it still all comes out to being pretty good. Not great, but good. And at the end, the shop that appeared did give me that big sense of accomplishment that I love in games, so that's going to bump my score up to a 7.5. As I said, it's good, and in a weird way, I'm kind of glad that it's just good. Because when it comes to Resident Evil, it feels like the vast majority of the games in this franchise are either amazing, some of the best games of the year, or huge, disappointing letdowns that we do not talk about. So I'm kind of glad that we now have some meat in the middle of this. God, what do you call it? Not a taco, not a gyro, a burger? No, that's not it. Come on, what is it? Damn it, it'll come to me eventually. Thank you guys for tuning in to our review of Resident Evil 3 Remake. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you like this video, then make sure that you share it around the web. It is the best way to help this channel grow. And if you want to see our future reviews and spoiler talks and all of our other videos that we do on this channel, make sure that you click that subscribe button and ring that bell so that way YouTube knows that you actually want to see more of them. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come at next sandwich. That's what it is. It's a Jill sandwich. Oh my goodness. It was right there the entire time.